All right, so today we're going to look at what we call the first freedoms. That's those rights that are protected by the First Amendment. And I know y'all are all familiar with them, right? You all know that the First Amendment protects freedom of speech, religion, press, and assembly. But we're going to look at exactly what is protected. Because in my experience, most people don't really know what they can and can't do. So, religious freedom. Religious freedom is protected under what we call the Establishment Clause. First Amendment says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. So, what does that mean? Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion.
They can't
They won't make a law based on a certain religion.
It says Congress can't make a state religion. Congress can't say this is going to be our religion and we're all going to have that.
Can't favor one religion.
Can't favor one over the other. The second part of it is the free exercise clause. It says, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So Congress can't establish a religion, nor can they prevent you from practicing a religion. So does that mean that we have absolute freedom of religion?
Yes.
Sounds like it. Sounds like it, okay? But
Close enough.
let's look at what the court has said. The court says that there are limitations, okay? You can look at religion in three ways. The right to believe, the right to advocate, and the right to practice. You have the right to believe anything, okay? Congress cannot stop you from believing whatever you want to. You can believe in the spaghetti monster if you want to be your God. Walk around with a colander on your head and worship the great big spaghetti monster in the sky. That's okay. Your belief is absolute. The right to advocate for your religion, that means the right to proselytize, to try and spread your religion, has a lot of protection. There's a reason why they can come knock on your door at 8 o'clock on Saturday morning and try and hand you out pamphlets. Okay? They have the right to advocate their religion. But it's not as absolute. There are some limitations. If I have a no trespassing sign and they come through my gate to try and drop those off, that's not okay. Okay? There are some limits. And then the right to practice your religion is limited. Let me give you an example of a limitation. There's a group of people in the Appalachian Mountains that take the Bible literally. Every word of it literally. And there's a line in the Bible that says that if you are filled with the Holy Spirit, you can handle serpents safely. So this group of people take rattlesnakes out and they handle them in the churches. And every year, somebody gets bitten and dies from this stuff. Every year. Snake handling. Snake handling is illegal. You cannot legally do that in the United States. Even though it's your religion, you can't do it because it endangers someone else. Okay?
It's reasonable.
Voodoo. Voodoo is a real religion. I don't know if y'all know this or not. Voodoo comes out of, it's what happens when you take the Catholic religion and African animism and they got mixed together in the Caribbean. You end up with this voodoo religion. And one of the practices of voodoo once upon a time was sacrifices. You can be a voodoo princess if you want to. You cannot go sacrifice somebody to your God. Okay? So there are limitations to religion. It is not absolute. The First Amendment does not exempt you from following laws that are designed to protect public health or safety, peace or morals. Peace and morals is a little harder to get to, but think of an example of this. In primitive Mormonism, now it's not true anymore in the modern Mormon church, but in primitive Mormonism, they taught that men should have as many wives as they could afford, polygamy. Polygamy is illegal in the United States. I don't care if you are a Mormon, you're not allowed to have more than one wife. So, there's a couple of ways you can test this religion. And courts use tests to determine whether or not something is protected or not. So if you were to sue somebody for violating this cause, the court could use what they call the no preference doctrine. And what these guys say, judges that use this doctrine say that it's okay for the court or for the government to encourage religious practices. It's just not okay to show preference for one religion over another, okay? So you can encourage religious deeds, but you can't encourage a specific religion. So that's one way of looking at it. When you think about prayer in schools, prayer before a football game or a basketball game, people that have the no preference doctrine would say it's fine to have that in school, even though it's a government school, it's fine to have prayer as long as the prayer is not sectarian, as long as it's not a Catholic prayer or a Muslim prayer or a Protestant. If this is generic prayer, it's okay. Okay? That would be the no preference doctrine. The other version is called the wall of separation doctrine, and this has become most popular since the 1980s. And it goes back to a quote from Thomas Jefferson. When Thomas Jefferson was, in fact, before he was president, they passed the Bill of Rights, and they passed this law. And this group of Baptists in Massachusetts, the Danbury Baptists, wrote a letter saying, I'm worried about this freedom of religion thing because I'm kind of worried that they're going to be able to outnumber us, and the Baptists are not going to be able to practice in this Puritan area. And Jefferson had said, no, the Constitution puts a wall of separation between government and state. Okay? Well, that's been quoted. And the people that quote it, guys like Hugo Black, say that government and religion can never mix, ever. There has to be a complete separation all the time. These are the ones that would say you can have no prayer in school, ever. These are the ones that would take the Ten Commandments off the courthouse steps. And this has been the most popular belief.
So what about the dollar bill saying that you gotta be tracked?
Yeah, these are the ones that would want to take that off that too. They would fight against that. That wasn't on until the 1950s. All right, so there's been a couple of tests. Let's look at a couple of Supreme Court cases. McCollum versus Board of Education. This is 1948. Champlain, Illinois had a release time program in school. Schools were offering a religion class. At school, a religious class. But the release time said that parents could sign a document allowing their kids to be released from the regular school schedule to take a Bible class. So this period of day, you're released from school, you're going to have a Bible class. They brought a preacher in, he taught this class. But the class was taught on campus in a school classroom. They were sued. The Supreme Court said this was unconstitutional. And why it was unconstitutional? He said, you're using a government school, you're using government buildings, even if you're not using government staff, you're using a school that's paid for with tax dollars to teach this class, and that's unconstitutional. It violates the separation of church and state. Okay? So they lost this one. That was in 1948. Then we have Zurot versus Clausen. The New York public school system also had a release time program. The difference between this one and the previous is this one, the parents signed a document and the kids got to leave school. They left school, they went across the street to a church and they had this class, and then they came back. They were also sued. The court said this was fine because no government money was used. It was off campus. What do y'all think? Would you agree with the court or not?
On this one,
You think this is okay? You think the other one was okay?
yes.
I kind of think either one would be okay. But the court has drawn that fine distinction. And it's just a distinction of where the class is held. Okay? Ingle v. Vitale. New York again, drafted a non-sectarian prayer. What a non-sectarian prayer is, it means it's not a religious specific. It prays to a generic God. Dear God, help us, okay? But they required students to recite it daily. So every morning, whenever you did the Pledge of Allegiance, you would recite this prayer. Some atheist parents got mad. They sued. The Supreme Court threw this out. Said it's unconstitutional. You can't do it. And the reason you can't do it is because the government cannot write a prayer, and schools are government. You can't write a prayer and then require your citizens to recite it.
I don't agree with that.
I do agree with this. I don't want the government writing a prayer and making people recite it. This bothers me.
That's
Yeah.
what bothers me.
But, plus, I don't know how you have a non-sectarian prayer. I don't know how you pray to a generic God. I don't get that, whatever. But, Ingle v. Vitale, they ended up losing this case. Abington School District versus Shemp, I'm sorry it's shut off, 1963. This Pennsylvania public schools at this time required that students read 10 Bible verses a day. So there was a time they put these 10 Bible verses and everybody had to read it. The court ruled this was unconstitutional. Why do you think they said this was unconstitutional?
Because I think you're forcing religion on someone.
And it's not non-sectarian, it's a Bible verse. It's not just a generic God, right? If it's a Bible verse, it's a specific God, it's Yahweh.
Specific religion.
Yeah. So that was ruled unconstitutional. Murray v. Curlin, also 1963. Baltimore public schools were requiring that the Lord's Prayer be recited every day along with Bible verses at school. Our Father who art in heaven, every day, you're reciting it. And Madeline Murray O'Hare sues. She was the mother of the child that had to do it. She wins this case. She becomes the most famous atheist in the world when she wins this case. By the way, I don't know if y'all ever heard of her, Madeline Murray O'Hare? She disappeared in the 70s, I guess. Just disappeared along with several $1 million that was embezzled out of the fund, and she's never been seen since then. Don't know if she stole the money and ran, or if she was murdered and somebody else stole the money, but she just disappeared. Her son, the guy that she was suing over because he had to say these, he ends up becoming a preacher later on and thinks his mother's crazy. So, all right, so that takes us through the religious part. Let's talk about speech. Freedom of belief, speech, and action. Okay, when we talk about speech, we're talking about all three of those. Belief has absolute protection. Again, you can believe whatever you want. Speech, you have a great deal of protection in your speech. Okay, you're pretty much free to say what you want to. There's a couple of limitations. You can't. Hate speech can be punished. Bullying speech can be punished. Profanity can be punished some places. But it's pretty hard to stop you from saying something. Okay? Action is greatly limited. The example I would give is burning the flag. Okay? Do you have a right to burn the flag? Well, you burn the flag because you think the United States is corrupt. Do you have a right to believe the U.S. is corrupt? Absolutely. Speech. Do you have the right to say the U.S. is corrupt? Okay, yeah, you can do that. Action. Do you have the right to go take the flag down and burn it?
You have
Right now you do. Right now you do.
Yes.
Take it the other way. You believe this, I'll let you believe this. I'll argue with you here legally. But when you pull the flag down and I knock your teeth out for it up here, this is an action I can't do. Okay? So your actions are limited. Does that make sense? tests to determine whether or not a speech is dangerous and can be limited. First test is called the doctrine of dangerous tendencies, doctrine of bad tendencies. Judges that use this say that you can limit any speech that has a tendency to lead to a dangerous or illegal action. You ever heard the saying you can't yell fire in a crowded theater? That's because if you did, there'd be a stampede and people would die, right? Yelling fire in a crowded theater is not free speech because it has a tendency to lead to an illegal action, okay? Remember Charles Manson we talked about the other day? Guy that's spent his life in prison because he told somebody to go murder someone and they did it.
It's cold.
His speech had a tendency to lead to an illegal action. You can't plot. You can't tell somebody to murder somebody either if they go through. You're part of it, okay? This bothers me because it doesn't say it has to lead to an illegal action. It says it has to have a tendency to lead to an illegal action. This is how they limit our speech on the internet a lot of times. The next one is the doctrine of clear and present danger. This was put forth by Chief Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes. This is a little harder. He said that speech can only be limited when it clearly and presently leads to an illegal action. So clearly means obvious, factually, and presently means now, okay, in the present. So if I went up to you and went, I really think you ought to go over there and just punch him in the nose, and you did it, that meets this definition. It clearly and presently leads to an illegal action. You could limit that speech. But if I sat up here and just talked about how much I don't like Cameron and how horrible he is and all this stuff, and then later on, because I said that, you walked over there and you punched him in the nose of your own accord, you're not limiting my speech for that. Because mine did not clearly lead to it, nor did it presently lead to it. It has to have that type of a connection. Does that make sense? And then there's this one. This is me, the doctrine of preferred position. These are people that looked at the Constitution and they went, it was the First Amendment. It was the very first thing they did after the Constitution was written. When they looked around, they said the most important thing is the First Amendment. We're going to protect these rights. And because of that, your First Amendment rights have a preferred position over all other rights. So you can tell me I have a right not to be offended.
7th and 8th grade are released for lunch.
You can say I have a right not to be offended. You can't say that. And I can say my First Amendment right to free speech comes before your right not to be offended. I have a preferred position. My right, my First Amendment right is more important than your right not to be offended.